Ugh. How much does this suck? Just to kind of update you, I posted that little teaser video a couple days ago, which I don't think anybody ever really watched. No, a few people did, but what I'm doing here is I'm changing the front end, and this is now, I don't know if you can tell from here, this is now a raked front end. It's raked out 3 degrees. So you can see that rather than coming down like this, like the normal front end would, this is going to be raked out a little bit. So if you can kind of, so that's what I'm doing. I'm changing the front end out. But I thought I'd post this. I bought a new front end. These triple trees are new. They're a narrow glide again, which is what I had in here originally. I've also got this wheel right here, which is in perfect shape, and a tire, a 16-inch Avon tire that's got maybe about 250 miles on it. Excellent shape, and they're on eBay for sale. If you're interested, let me know. A little bit. I think that raked out look is going to look good. I've got a couple of other little changes planned. I'm not going to tell you about that. That part I'll keep a secret. It does involve the front end though. Little problem I'm having is when you put the front end on these bikes. First of all, before I even get into that, if you look around this garage in this house that we're renting, this house is probably built in the 50s. And this garage is not insulated, obviously. There's no drywall, it's not insulated. My last garage, it was, first of all, it was a 3-car garage. It was insulated and we had drywall. So while it wasn't heated, it wasn't like this either. This is like being, I may as well be out there when I'm working in here. That's how cold it is. So getting back to this, the procedure to put these in is the trees go in without the fork legs in. There's a stem bolt here. So once you put the trees in, hand tighten the stem bolt. Then the fork legs slide up through here. And the fork legs, this really up here is a matter of preference. You know, some people like to bring them up a little bit more. Some people like to keep them flush. So once you put those in, then there's a torque sequence you have to do. And then after you torque it down, you loosen it back up, and then you tighten it down to, I think it's 19 inch-pounds. Torquing it up brings it together, I believe. The bearings that are in here sit inside the stem. But the problem I'm having is once I torque it up to spec, it doesn't want to move. In fact, I had to loosen it, but if you look here, you can see where it's scraping on this stop. So to solve that, I've got a couple of washers that I'm going to put underneath this bearing on the bottom. So once I get this front end off, I'll pull that bearing up, put a couple of washers on, and put it back on again, and we'll see. It should be okay at that point. It should move fine. So I got a really cool wheel coming. It's being made for me. I'll get this thing fixed up. I'll post a little video after I get the washers in here and get that fixed up. And this fender actually also, this is a 16-inch fender. I'm sorry, this is a fender for a 16-inch wheel. Will also fit an 18-inch wheel. This is the fender that I painted, and it's Harley Vivid Black with copper and white trim. This is for sale on eBay as well, so if you have a need for a front fender, you know, maybe you're doing what I did and putting a wide glide front end on your bike, I don't know, but this is for sale as well. So that's what I'm doing, and once I get this apart, I'll come back to you and show you what it looks like when it's apart. We'll pull the bearing out. Can you see that? And I'll post another video. So that's it. So I've got the triple tree off the bike. Here's the lower half of the tree. Here's the fork legs. Lower half of the tree, and you can see, I had to come inside because it's too fucking cold out there. You can see where that just really scraped up, where that stop on that's welded to the neck really scraped up this here. So what I'm going to have to do, I'm getting this bearing off, is not going to be easy. So what I don't have a press. So back here there's a little clip, and I'll take that clip off, and then I have to take this to a local mechanic who works on my car. He's got a press, and what he'll do is he'll press this stem out, and then he'll press the bearing off the stem. Most of these stems are kind of tapered inward as they go up here, and getting the bearing on and off because of the taper is difficult. This bearing, you want it to be tight down here. But this neck, this is an aftermarket part, and this neck right here is the same diameter all the way up and down. So this bearing kind of slipped on and off the neck, so I had to use some sleeve retainer, which is pretty permanent, to hold this thing on so it wouldn't slide up and down. What I need to do is, the reason the bearing is coming off is this washer right here will go, probably a couple of these at least, will go underneath the dust. There's a dust cover here, and the bearing sits on top of the dust cover. So at least one, maybe two or three of these washers will go underneath the dust cover, and I'm hoping that will push this far enough away from the stop so it won't drag anymore. And then I think maybe just sand this, because this is kind of rough right here. I'll sand this and put some primer on it, and touch it up with a little bit of gloss black paint, just so you won't see it and so it doesn't rust. So that's the object now, is to I only have one of these washers. I need to get a couple more. So again, once I get this off, I could just drop the washer down, then I'll put the dust cover and the bearing on top. Of course, that's full of freaking grease. And then we'll see where we are from there. So that's the plan now. I'll update you after I get my mechanic to press this stem out for me. Excuse the terrible light, but here's the stem and the tree right here. I've got some spacers. By the way, these were not easy to find. My mechanic didn't have them. My local hardware store didn't have them. I had to go to a motorcycle specialty shop that does repairs to get these. And these babies, I had one. $2.25 each. Believe it or not. And I'm sure you believe it. So we've got that, and then we've got a Timken bearing. The bearing is $12.95. So I'm going to use my rubber mallet here. I'm going to knock this stem back in here, and then once I get that done, I'll show you how it's going to go together. I'll go out and put the trees back on the bike and torque it down and videotape that. So I'll get back to you here in a second. So I've pressed the stem back in. I've got 2 spacers on here. I didn't use all 3. If you look where the spacers kind of come up to, they're almost to this point right here. So once I put the bearing on there, I should be well above it, and I shouldn't scrape here any longer. If I need to use the third, I have a third here, but I'll hold off on that. So the next thing I have to do is grease up the bearing. Bearings come in packages like this, and I'm going to put the camera down for a second. Actually, I'll pause it for a minute while I open the bearing. Okay, here's the bearing. So this is the way it comes out of the package. It's nothing special. It is not greased. I mean, there's a little bit of lubricant on here, but it is not grease. This has to be greased before you put it on. The way I was taught to grease a bearing is basically to put, first of all, this has to be kept clean, which is why it comes in a wrapper like this, and the wrapper says do not open until you're ready to put the bearing, until you're ready to install the bearing. So it'll be fine right here. But the way I was taught to grease a bearing is pretty simple. Put a big glob of bearing grease in the palm of your hand. With your other hand, take the bearing and just push that bearing down in your hand, turn it over, push the other side, roll it around in your hand, you know, this kind of way, like this, push it down, and you want to see grease ooze out the sides of the bearing here, and you want to make sure you're greased well in here, all around the perimeter, and also up in here. But you really need, you know, it's not greased properly until you have grease in all these little openings. So it's important that you grease that really well. And you can see that's all greased really well. So I'm going to do that now. The good is it goes on easily. The bad is it's not supposed to be that loose when it's down here. So I have some, let's see where it is here. I'm starting to get a little messy, and I hate when I'm messy. I have some of this sleeve retainer. So a couple of drops of this stuff, it's kind of like Loctite. A couple of drops inside. I'll clean the grease off the inside. I'll put a couple of drops of that on, and that'll help hold it into place. You don't want to get dust in a bearing. You want to keep these clean. This is a dust cover. You see it's pretty much flush on this side, and you can see where the bearing will kind of set into here when I'm all done. So I've got my spacers. The dust cover goes on next. The bearing goes on top of that, like so. After I grease it, obviously. So this is what you end up with. You end up with, see that space? That should get me far enough away from the stop so I'm not dragging anymore. So let me grease up the bearing. I'm going to do that in the house, carefully with a lot of rags, and hopefully my wife not finding out. I'll never hear the end of that. So let me grease the bearing up. Get back out here, put the bearing on the stem, put some, well, before I put the sleeve retainer on there, I'm going to test fit this to make sure it works and fits right, and then providing it does, I'll put some sleeve retainer on there, and I'll torque it down, which would be the next step in the process. So I'll get right back to you. That is a properly greased up bearing. This pretty simple. And you'll see this pop out. This is the upper bearing and dust cap. That's no big deal. That's going to pop out because I'm hitting it with the end of the stem. That's how that'll come through. Get the top part of the tree, put it on top of there, and then I have my stem bolt and washer, which are right there. They will screw down in, where are we? Into there. And that's what holds your trees together. So give me a second, I'll come back and after I get that put together. This is still not right. I actually went back and put the third washer on. Now obviously I don't have the forks in here, but if I do this and torque it to spec, it's still, as you see, I'm trying to move this with my hand, it barely moves. And that's why I'm scraping that up. I can barely move that. Now you can see I'm spaced out right there, but it's just hitting this stop right in here. That's what it's hitting against. As soon as I tighten it down, it rubs against that. I've already got 3 spacers. I mean, I can't keep putting spacers, but I'm guessing 1 or 2 more might work. That's where I'm at with this, and that's what I'm doing with the bike anyway. What I'm trying to do is to rake the front end out a little bit. I'm not sure if 3 or 4 spacers, or 4 or 5 spacers rather, would be too much, but we'll find out, I guess. And that's it. Loose, and this turns no problem. But I can't leave that like that, because obviously that's going to work its way loose. So there you go. Those are my plans. That's what I'm up to. That's what I'm doing. Any suggestions are always appreciated. Otherwise, I'll get back to you with another video when it gets a little bit warmer out and I figure out what I'm going to do. See ya.